C++ provides a very useful iterating loop called the for loop. Here in Xcode, I've opened a working copy of working.cpp. The for loop is like a while loop with extra controls designed to help with iteration, so I'm actually going to start with a while loop here. And we'll just do this just like we did the last one. And so we have a simple integer array, and we have an integer that we can use for indexing, and then we're going to put in our while loop while I is less than 5, and we'll print the array element, and then we'll increment I. So when I build and run this, it prints out the elements of the array, just like in the last lesson. So this is actually a really common usage for a loop, to iterate through a container like that. And so C++ provides a control called the for loop, which does all of this a lot easier. So here we'll type for instead of while, and we'll just take this initializer up here, and we'll put it in here like that. And then after the condition, we'll increment I, so we don't need this down here anymore. And it ends up looking like this. So inside the parentheses for the for loop, the parameters of the for loop, there's 3 expressions. The first expression happens before the loop begins, and it only happens once. And so it's often used for defining and initializing a variable. Like in this case, the integer I that's going to be used to index the array. And there's always a semicolon after the first expression. The second parameter is the condition, and this is just like the while loop. It's a condition that tests at the top of the loop. So this loop will continue as long as this expression is true. And then the third parameter is code, or in this case, an expression that is run at the very end of the loop before the loop is tested again to see if it's going to continue. So this happens every time through the loop after all the code in the block. So it's really exactly the same code as what we had in our while loop. And when I build and run, you'll see that it does exactly the same thing. So there's a number of different cool things that you can do with this. Like for instance, if instead of an array of integers, we had a string, and instead of all this, we just use a pointer, and then we don't have that index anymore. All we have now is the pointer, and it's no longer a integer. Now it's a character. And of course, this string is a character string like this. So now what we have is a character array, which is a C string. And our initializer, that first element of the for loop, which is an expression that is evaluated before the loop begins just once, it declares a character pointer and it initializes it to the first element of the array. The condition is simply checking what's pointed at by that character pointer to see if it's true. And in C++, a 0 is always false and everything else is true. So it's just testing to see if we've gotten to the end of the string, because you remember a string is terminated with a 0 or a null. And then the post expression, this is the expression that's run at the end of the code block, it simply increments the pointer. And so now when we run this, we build and run, we get each of the elements of the array just like that. So this is another very common usage for the for loop. The for loop is a fundamental control in C++. It's incredibly powerful and useful, and you'll see a lot of examples of it throughout this course and in the various code that you look at. It may look cryptic at first, but once you get to know it, you'll find a lot of uses for it, and it's actually very simple to understand. We'll look at another form of the for loop in the next lesson that's new in C++ 11.